Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity. What I'd like to talk about firstly is maybe just to start out, I was just wondering exactly why I'm here. And then this morning session I attended some that was here on sustainability. I thought it was a particularly good session with Professor Majorzi. And I sort of realized that a lot of the issues that Pierre Miller and company were actually talking about, we actually doing in a very concrete manner in the Eastern Cape. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is essentially the Coega SEZ, sometimes we call it the Industrial Development Zone or Special Economic Zone. And it's come about as a result of the new legislation, that's why we call it SEZ now. And I want to talk about what the sort of journey that we've gone through in terms of industrial development and actually providing the water resources for that. So I'll give you a brief overview of the SEZ itself, talk about our package of plans, which has treated us really well, talk about water demand planning, and then move on to a conclusion. We're a wholly owned government public entity reporting to the DTI and also with connections to the Metro and to province. Currently, in terms of size, we're about 9,000 hectares in terms of size. Over the years, we started out in about 2000. We had about 6.6 billion rand worth of investment, about 16,000 jobs, 85,000 trained, and so forth. In terms of the operational investors that we have at the SEZ, that's just a list of who we've got actually operational. It's a fairly extensive list, and it's also quite international in flavour as well. In terms of the accolades that we've had, I think the Coega SEZ, or Coega Development Corporation, which is the operator of the Coega SEZ, is well established and well acknowledged in terms of being a leader in the area. We had quite a sort of parade of people coming through, and we've received very good accolades even from the Vice President of China, who views the Coega SEZ as being one of the better ones that he's come across. In terms of how the SEZ is structured, we have 14 zones. It's an area just outside of Port Elizabeth, about 20 kilometers outside of Port Elizabeth, or Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality. Those 14 zones cater for different types of economic sectors. So, for instance, Zone 1 over there, which caters for logistics. We've got the new deepwater port that was constructed and came into operation around 2009. We came off a very low base. Currently, we're doing about 750,000 containers TEU per annum, and it's got capacity as it stands now to take it up to 2 million, with a longer-term capacity of 8 million. We've also got an automotive cluster. We've got general industry or agro-processing, chemicals, aquaculture. The list is fairly extensive. The sort of investments that we've had peaking plants there. Those just gives the types of jobs and values. We've had logistics companies coming in. We've had cheese companies in terms of agro-processing, and also things such as business process outsourcing. Also in the automotive sector, you may have heard of this one, Bike International. You may not know the brand of vehicle. It's not a VW or a GM, but it's got a global footprint. The company's 207 on the global fortune of 500. We started construction on that. We cleared the site and had it ready December 2016, and we're looking at getting it, the first cars coming off that line in 2018. It's a massive investment. Ultimately, it will go down to 100,000 units, and it's on a 56-hectare site within Zone 1. That's just an artist's impression of that particular site. So really, the question is, I think it's fairly straightforward. We've had some considerable success. in terms of how this SEZ is operating, and it's roundly acknowledged. And people often ask us, well, how did we manage to do that? And what's the secret? How did you get this right? It started out essentially with the second port. What we must recognize is that the southern seaboard of Africa has always been a very difficult shipping sort of area. Essentially, you've got drifting dunes, it's got very deep sand, there's no real natural harbors. Port Elizabeth was very poorly formed as a harbor right from the inception, and there was a need for a new deep water port. So currently we're sitting with a metro that's served by 2 ports. We've got that capacity with, if we put PE onto that, of 2.6 million TEU. We've got CCAs established, or custom controlled areas, which gives you advantages in terms of the customs legislation and also in terms of surety bonds. So it becomes very attractive for investors. We've also got a lot of surety in terms of labour services. Strike rates are relatively low there, or labour stoppages compared to comparable venues. We've got project development expertise, regulatory approvals in place. We've got a sort of plug-and-play environment in the sense that you don't have to go through a 6-month site development plan process to get your building plans approved. We can work it through on a 10-10 cycle. But the real reason we've actually got this all in place is for one reason, is we've got our services and our long-term planning sorted out. Our roads, electricity, wastewater, and most importantly, we've started to look very, very carefully in terms of how do we cater for the water requirements in the long term. I believe that's given us a significant advantage in terms of giving surety to investors coming in. People don't want to come into an investment destination if they haven't got a stable labour market and if they haven't got services that they can rely on. In terms of developing these services, we adopted what they call a package of plans approach, and we got all our approvals up front with the Metro in terms of having a package of plans which specified our services. So for instance, it aligns with the spatial development framework of the city. We then have a development framework plan which was approved by the city. We operate in terms of this development framework plan and work according to the clusters and develop those clusters. Our master plan for the area actually indicates where our services are going in terms of the various bulk services, electrical, roads, etc. And then, of course, with the port as well, we have the ability to expand that port going into the future. So the package of plans has got planning at various levels that goes from the high level STF level at a metropolitan right down to the actual processing of business plans, which gives us that advantage. In terms of where we are, this is a very important graphic. What you'll see is that there's about 11,000 hectares that are sitting there. Of that 11,000, about 1,000 belongs to the 1,200 belongs to the port. And then the green areas is where we actually maintain our ecological processes. The environmental studies have been done, and those were set apart right from the beginning of the project, and they are essentially they are incorporated within the bioregional plan of the province. The grey areas, the grey areas is essentially where we have developable land, and the yellow areas is essentially for services such as your bulks, your water, electricity, and so forth. The interesting thing, what you'll see, is that we have a core development area, which is the first 5 zones. Most of the zones are populated here in terms of the logistics and automotive zones, in terms of the percentages. Those are higher, these percentages are lower. The black lines essentially indicate where we've got our services, but our planning for the services for the rest of the zone is in place. In terms of water demand planning, our whole approach to water demand planning is to undertake spatial planning to actually support water demand for long-term growth and for short-term demand. We want to focus on this area. You've got to have the big picture. You don't want to get a IDZ impetus going and then run out of water halfway. We must remember that with the Coega Development Zone, when we first started out, one of our first investors there was actually a aluminum smelter. And that went away and it was placed on hold because we could not supply electricity due to the national crisis that emerged. One of these things I think we must also recognize from Nelson Mandela Bay is, and I think it's helped the thinking considerably in the metro, is that we've always been a metro that's very water aware. And if we go back to the earliest imagery of the area, you'll find that the name Algoa Bay actually comes from Bay of Lagoons. So we had all these water resources. Problem is that they were all estuaries and they were all very, very small water systems. They became centers of industry, and when they became centers of industry, remember, we were the center of industry for the world. We were the Liverpool of the Cape as such. And when they became these centers of industry, we denigrated and destroyed those river systems. We filled them in with a building rubble of buildings that were knocked down, and those systems largely became dysfunctional. We were essentially forced from a water resource point of view to actually go and fetch our water resources outside of the metro. From a very early stage, from the 1860s onwards, from getting our water resources right at the mouth here of the Barkens River, we first then developed water resources there. Those weren't enough, and we gradually moved out to the Finstadens and then the Coega, and eventually we got to a situation that we're drawing our water resources not only from the hinterland, i.e. the Coega municipality here from the Coega scheme, but we're also pulling water all the way from the Gerib and the Orange River schemes. So we work in a very water resource or a very water scarce environment, and we've got to look after those resources. So we had very strong precedents to water planning, and there's a very good book out by Dave Raymer which covers essentially the development of water resources in the Bay, and it's very instructive to read that. From the 1860s to this day, we've taken our water resources very seriously. There's currently what we call an Algoa reconciliation strategy, which is in place for the metro. This started out in 2010. It had precedents before that. We've got status reports, and we ensure water balancing for up to a 25-year planning horizon. And it essentially identifies as responsibilities and timings of actions to actually reconcile these various resources. In terms of the actual demand for water within the NMBM, we've seen a process where the blue line was the actual water consumption. And you can see that we've hit the drought situation here about 2015. We introduced water restrictions. This green line is actually the availability of the actual supply. And so for a long time, we were actually exceeding the supply. And that's being brought down through a whole range of interventions. In terms of the annual use of the Algoa water system, what you'll see is that industry, our IDZ potable use currently is that small sliver. It's about 3 megalitres a day. And the reason is that we haven't got any of the intensive water users in place yet. What was mentioned earlier on is about this role of canal losses. You can see that percentage that you lose just with irrigation schemes. And then irrigation uses nearly 60%, 58 million cubic meters per annum, and the metro uses 107. So as industrial use, it's a very, very small proportion as the RDZ goes. The focus areas that we've been looking at to augment our water uses or water sources going forward is first and foremost this whole thing of water conservation and demand management. You cannot go and use, if you're using surface water resources and you're essentially losing 30 to 40% through pipeline losses, irrigation canals, whatever the case might be. So that conservation and demand management is a very important aspect. But the area which is where we focus, which has been the lifeline for us, has been this Neugebracht low-level scheme. That low-level scheme was completed in August 2017. There were various delays to that one. So we're up at 125 megalitres a day on that. The other areas where we've undertaken a considerable amount of work is also around desalination. We've identified 3 potential sites. We've developed the Coega Marine Servitude for taking in seawater there, and then also on the Swartkops River. Currently, those costs are still very high, but it's starting to look more and more attractive in terms of the work that is being done. The other thing is groundwater has become a very important aspect. People don't remember that the Utenake system, or the artesian groundwater system, is probably one of the most significant groundwater resources in Southern Africa. We've just drilled wells on Coega Kop, and that's going to yield about 30 megalitres per day, albeit with a very high iron and manganese content. However, for us as an SEZ, the real game is not for us to be using potable water. We recognize that if we're going to get the big water users, i.e. a smelter, the type of industries which are included within IPAP, for instance, a metal smelter, beneficiation around that area, other big water users are refineries. We will have to look at industrial water or category 4 water, and there's a lot of that currently going into the bay. There's currently about 120 megalitres of water discharged into Algoa Bay at the moment on a daily basis, and you can tap into that water supply. The current quality, the one day it's very good, industrial quality, the next day it's sort of iffy. And you've got, so there's a whole plan in place in terms of stabilising the quality of those works to a Cat 4. The first phase to Coega Kop would be 30 megalitres a day, with the second phase at 60 megs. It'll be an MBR process, which we've planned for at Fishwater Flats and at future Coega wastewater treatment works. That's just some of the phasing that's indicated over there. And this graph is very important, is what you can see here. The blue line is essentially our potable water. You can see our requirements for potable water at the moment are very slow. Our issue with the red line at industrial water, we haven't got a big industrial offtake at the moment. And we're sitting with a chicken and egg situation, is that the big users want to be assured of industrial water. We can't use potable water for that. But at the same time, they don't want to sort of come along because there is no industrial water at the moment. We've developed about 7 different growth scenarios as part of the Algoa reconciliation scheme. Those are all indicated there. We believe that based on the per hectare breakdown that we've given for the entire SEZ, we can meet the industrial water requirements with the appropriate level investments over the period of the planning horizon. In terms of the NMBM master plan for water, we're aligned with that. So we've got the various catchments. We're aligned in terms of the Motherwell expansions to go further north and to provide a source of domestic wastewater which we could reuse for industrial purposes. All the pipelines, balancing reservoirs, Coega, for instance, quite a couple of the balancing reservoirs are already constructed. Essentially what we need to be doing next is to actually bring the RE from the Fishwater Flats through to Coega, which is a big buck item. That is just our master plan in terms of pipeline networks, and that's also another detailed in terms of the RE schema, bulk water and sewage. To move to a conclusion on this is that the master planning is in place to accommodate all these various growth scenarios, and we're very confident about that. Where we have issues is in terms of the scale at which we're working and the uncertainty in respect of investment. We can't go and put 600 million rands worth of pipeline infrastructure into the ground if we haven't got an offtake yet for industrial water. And at the same time, we've got to make sure that our period from moving to supply that investor is within acceptable timeframes. The one way in which we dealt with that is that we have plans that can actually use potable water on a return scheme, or an effluent return scheme, which is mixed, to actually provide on an interim basis to a big investor like, for instance, the manganese smelter. The manganese smelter was supposed to arrive approximately 2 years ago, so we had transitional measures in place for that. So the sort of time frame that we can bring RE into the SEZ is anything from about a year to 24 months. I think institutional issues are still a key focus area. The institutional issues in terms of which institution does what, how's the funding going to be provided, who supplies the funding, the issues of private-public partnerships, all of those are probably our most significant focus areas that we need to pay attention to, and we are starting to look at those now with the NMBM, and we're moving to some resolution. Funding is obviously a key issue. I think for a RE scheme like this, you're talking serious investments. It runs into billions, and but it provides the sort of opportunities for industrial growth that provides a payback on a sustainable basis. We can provide, the numbers are indicating that we can provide RE far more competitively than at a potable level. The environmental studies are completed or in progress for various components. So, for instance, we've got environmental authorizations in place for the RE scheme already. We've got marine servitude, which is defined, and that's currently in a scoping and EIA phase, and various other components of the project are at various levels of completion. I think the imperative is really about collaboration. There's so much expertise, and when you look at the potential that we have within the metro, within the region, within the country, it's imperative that we start leveraging all of that expertise, and including that here within the CSIR, and to develop collaborative approaches to actually really optimize the potential that we have there. I have no doubt whatsoever that the industrial development focus is certainly going to move towards the coasts, with the energy sources up here increasingly under threat, i.e. coal, an emphasis on nuclear, emphasis on renewables. The coastal locations are going to become more and more appealing to big investments. When the Chinese first came along with the bike investment, which is a massive investment, we confidently said to them, this is the best location in Southern Africa, no question about it. And they believed us, and they came, and I think they're fairly pleased with what they have. It's certainly the best piece of industrial real estate, and it certainly has the best security of supply when it comes to the actual services. And then finally, I think just the options for industrial ecology and industrial symbiosis that was mentioned earlier on by Per. We haven't really even noticed the Kalundberg models but essentially we're starting to do that anyway. We're starting to look at the reuse of water from, for instance, salt factories, essentially distilled water which is too pure to drink. The options that are there from the CCGT plant, which is planned for the area, which is a combined cycle gas turbine. There's a 1,000 megawatt plant that's planned for that. And the opportunities for the development of salt industries, for chlorine, for diesel are enormous. And I think ultimately that's it from me. Thank you very much.